Hello, Muse Nation. Yes, I am sticking with Muse Nation as the name right now. If you have a better one, please put it in the reviews or DM me on Instagram. But right now I'm sticking with it. Welcome to this episode of the Muse Report. We are on our 18th episode. And like I said last week, I will have a special guest in on this episode. And she was absolutely amazing. Her name is Jocelyn Smith. I know Jocelyn from for a few years now, maybe 2.5 years now, and she is just a great bubbly person. And she also is a psychology major, soon to be psychologist. Actually, she is graduating in like 2 weeks. So I had to have her on the show. I discussed some things with her about the topic of mental health. Now, please do not log off after I just said that word or 2 words, because you're saying mental health. I don't have mental health issues. I'm not crazy or anything like that. Well, it's not really about that in this episode. It's about things that we deal with on an everyday basis. Things like stress, things like going through grief, things like withdrawal symptoms from things that we all go through that are really mental health problems that we have to look at, just how we look at our physical problems or our spiritual problems. So she breaks it down in such a great way in this episode. She talks about her personal experiences and some things that she has grown through that I'm sure some of you can identify with. So you're really gonna love this episode. I know I did. And if it's just for one person, I hope you are touched. Also, if you like this podcast, please share it with someone. Do your due diligence to the world by sharing the wealth of knowledge that you gain from this podcast. Write some reviews. Give me some pointers on what you want to see in upcoming episodes, potential guests that you want to have on the show. Even if it's somebody who's probably completely out of my league, hey, I'll go out and reach to them. So just do that for me. Also, give this a rating. When we get more ratings, we go up on the iTunes rankings. So just do that for me if you support what I'm doing. And with that, without further ado, we're going to get right up into this episode. So here we go. One thing that I saw recently was people were walking around campus with shirts that say mental health matters too, or something like that. And just the topic, I've been meaning to have her come in for a little while now, talking about the topic of mental health, because it's becoming, mental health has always been a issue and a topic of discussion, but it's become more of a topic of discussion, I think, as of late, because people are becoming more aware of how much it is a part of who we are. Like, we talk about our physical health all the time. We talk about spiritual health. Mm-hmm. But mental health is something that we kind of used to cover up and say, well, that's not supposed to happen, so don't share it or don't talk about it because that's abnormal. But now we're kind of starting to see that it is not necessarily an abnormal thing. So everyone can relate to it, because everyone, either you might not necessarily identify as having a mental health issue, but I'm guaranteed that everyone's been stressed at some point. So just talking, I guess, with you about how we could deal with things like that, how we can address those type of things, and any type of questions that I think I've heard from people or I have myself about the topic. So I just want to first cover the basis of what exactly is being mentally healthy, or what does that look like? What does that feel like? Because I think the first thing that we need to identify is what is it, and how do I know whether I'm out of it or I'm in it?
Okay, so when it comes to mental health, it's very unique for every individual. You don't look at a guy or a girl at your school and go, oh, she seems mentally attractive, right, or he looks mentally attractive. And so we know that it isn't much like the more physical features that we hold, but it is very important. When it comes to mental health, different key features of healthy mental health is not necessarily not experiencing those feelings or those symptoms that we would attribute to a mental health illness or disorder. It is rather how you balance and how you are able to maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy friendship, and how you're able to bounce back or be resilient. And so I don't want you to think that being mentally healthy is having never experienced what we would consider something that is unhealthy.
Right.
Just as though you've been sick before, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so just because you've experienced being sick does not mean you're not well now.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So I'm kind of getting the idea that mental health kind of has encompasses the other aspects of health, because you kind of said like how your lifestyle balance,
Mm-hmm.
how you bounce back from, I guess, internal and external forces. So, I mean, that kind of has to do with your physical reaction to things as well as your overall lifestyle. So, in order to maintain like a good mentally healthy state, what are some things that we should do in our lifestyle every day to make sure that we stay in that realm of healthiness or something like that? I don't know how to word it right.
Okay. There are many physical characteristics that affect your mental health. In a course that I took at Oakwood University, it was called Biopsych, and it was amazing. And it talks about how we experience things from a mental perspective, but all of the physical attributes of it. So depression isn't simply I don't feel well, it's a chemical imbalance. And schizophrenia isn't simply I hear and see things that aren't there. It is more, it is actual, your brain is actually receiving messages.
Right, so it's actually a medical issue.
Yes,
right.
Like you can look at scans of the brain and it will show you areas that are being activated. The auditory sensors, the visual sensors are being activated while this person is not being spoken to and while they're not seeing anything. And so we know that there are physical attributes to mental health. And so what then can we do to ensure that we are remaining mentally healthy? I think the first would be to recognize where you are and where your mind is at a given moment. Much like an athlete, like yourself, you're aware when you're on the court, like, how am I?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how am I feeling? Am I doing as much as I can? Do I need to do anything differently? It's very healthy to be aware of where you are mentally. It may not be the most popular place to try to go back to, but it's really important to be aware of where we are because we use our brains all the time.
Yeah. Talk about all the time. Self-awareness is so
yes.
important.
And I find it very interesting as students, we're met with constant deadlines. And we're compared by our accomplishments and then those of others.
Right.
And before you graduate, I'm sure each of us will have experienced someone higher than us telling us, well, there's someone out there working harder than you for the same position you want. There's someone out there who has a more attractive resume than you do. So when you want to go to grad school, you need to be more competitive. And these pressures will really get to us mentally. And it's really important to recognize, how am I doing? And if I don't feel like I'm my best, why not? And this may be a very difficult place to be because we only see the world through our own perspective, through our own schemes. And so when you stop to recognize how am I doing and you go to address why you may or may not be feeling well, you want to try to be as unbiased as possible. Another important thing is to have a support system. I like to spend some time alone, but I know it's very important for me to be with others because isolation can drive you deeper and deeper into, in many cases, depression or anxiety because you're only filled with your thoughts and the only responses you have are from yourself. Right. And so it's really important to establish connections with other people because they can also help you and engage with you in conversation.
Okay, so if if you're struggling with something, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just overthinking a situation, how do you exactly know whether you need to seek help or whether you are just, it's something that, because I feel like we often believe this is something that I can handle on my own. And I think, I mean, personally, I'm not a person who I think has really struggled with extreme stress or feeling symptoms of depression or things like that. So often my mentality towards things like that, which could be wrong sometimes, is that, it's just something for right now. I'll shake it off or whatever, or I'll just go do something that takes my mind off of it and I'll be okay. But is there a fine line that we should watch whether, okay, this is just a temporary thing, we all get sad sometimes, or is this something that I need to actually look at and see if I'm suffering from an actual problem?
Okay, so I can actually speak of this from a personal perspective and standpoint, if you don't mind me sharing.
No.
So I've actually been depressed and I've had social anxiety. And there are certain things as a psychologist that you look at to diagnose whether something is clinical or if it's just an everyday thing. Because in our life, we will have highs and lows.
Right,
We'll feel great, and then we'll also feel terrible. But just because you had a bad day doesn't necessarily mean you're depressed. And you may hear people say like, oh, I like my desk a particular type of way. I'm just OCD like that. You don't have obsessive compulsive disorder.
You don't actually have OCD.
You don't have it. And much like if you were to sneeze, I wouldn't jump to conclusions and assume you had the flu.
Right.
It could just be allergies or something in the air. It could be a spice. It's not the most extreme case. However, there will always be signs. And as psychologists, we look at the DSM-5. And so the DSM is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and we're on the 5th edition. And what professionals do is they take the symptoms that you feel and they compare them to a scoring chart, and you go across, and when you meet a certain amount of criteria, that is when you are clinically diagnosed.
Okay.
However, because of the stigma of mental health, there are people who are clinically depressed and they don't know it. And they just think, I'm having a bad day for months.
Right.
And they can't get out of this funk. And they think it's something that they're doing, and it's not. They do need the help. And so for me personally, many of the symptoms would be when you get up in the morning. As a student, you may not always jump out to get dressed and go to class.
Monday, ready to go to class right
You don't
now.
want to. But when you're depressed, it's another level.
Right.
It's, I don't want to be awake right now. And not even I don't want to be awake. I don't want to be here in my skin. I don't want to be just breathing right now. I want to be done. And you're over everything and you have no energy for the things that you enjoy. I love weightlifting, and so I would wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym. I did not want to get up. And I knew something was going on because I was consistently going to the gym and I would write in my journal. And then for about 2 straight weeks, I did not want to get up at all. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm just, I'm in a funk. I need to get back at it. But I didn't even want to touch any of my gym equipment in my room. I would just lay in bed and I would wake up and just lay there. I didn't want to be around other people. I was happy in my isolation. And I thought that me enjoying being in my isolated state was good for me, but I was realizing I was pulling away from others.
Right.
With the social anxiety, it was a very irrational fear. I didn't want to be near people because being near people meant more than just, I'm going to be surrounded in a group.
Right.
It was, these people are watching me and I don't know what they're going to say to me. And often when you are experiencing something on a chronic level, it's extreme highs and lows. It's persistent feelings of depression. It is these thoughts that will not go away, no matter how hard you try. It's wanting to be pushed out in isolation, kind of cutting yourself off from your support, not doing the things that you know you love, and you are not yourself. And it's very, very scary to be in a place where you're not yourself and you think it's your fault when there are other levels to this. When you look at what is abnormality, there are 4Ds that psychologists follow. And so it's deviant, dysfunction, distress, and danger. And you look at these 4 to determine whether a behavior is abnormal. Often I could check myself. So I would look at if what I'm doing, is it deviant from the cultural or social norms that I usually do? Are my thoughts, are they very dysfunctional? Are they no longer where I know they should be? Is my distress, are my fears rational or irrational? And they were very irrational. Like, I can't go to the calf because there's people and the people are going to surround me and they're going to, just no one cares. Mm-hmm. But I was really fixated on, I really can't be near people. And the only way for me to be safe is if I'm alone. Right. And danger. Often you look at, am I a danger to myself? Are my thoughts becoming dangerous? You see a lot of students who have suicidal thoughts because of their clinical depression that they do not know that they have. And they're not sure why they feel this way. They're not sure why these thoughts are persistent. But there's a fine line between I had a bad day and I'm depressed. And for some, they may not know until they're on the ladder.
Right. So I guess I'm going to ask you a twofold question. Is it safe to self-diagnose? And after you have found out something about yourself, where do you go after that? Because it's often a very sensitive topic, and you don't really want to go to just anyone, or you don't really want to share it at all because that's something personal. People might look at you where they might try to treat you differently afterwards. They might look at you differently afterwards. So it's very important to know exactly what to do after you've figured out that something needs to be done. So just those 2 questions in one, I guess.
Okay. So speaking for myself, like I mentioned earlier with depression and social anxiety, those are actually things that I concluded on my own, looking at the DSM-5 and pulling out the chapters and sections that spoke on those issues. And I went and found the symptoms that I was experiencing over this amount of time. And that's what I concluded. Now, because I did this on my own, I did not seek professional help. I thought that I would be able to heal myself. Mm-hmm. And, here I am, my senior year, and I know that to be wrong. Mental health is one of those issues that people often are more inclined to figure out themselves. If you sprain your ankle, you're more inclined to speak to a professional because you want to know, okay, I know this is the problem, but how can I heal smoothly, quickly? And I want to get back to my normal self, but it's usually not the same when it comes to having to speak to a mental professional. And really because of our day and age, we can Google anything we want. Right. And so you can go now and just type in symptoms of depression and they'll give you everything. And then they'll tell you, these are the treatment methods and this is the time it usually takes to overcome it. And so it almost gives you this idea that, okay, I think I can do those things on my own. And for me personally, I thought that, okay, if I just pray, if I read my Bible, if I really pour into the Lord, like maybe I'll be able to get over these things. And honestly, I felt great after I did those things, but I know now that I never healed those wounds. Right. And so speaking from experience and speaking from a person who has then sought professional help, just to understand, like, if it's really to the point now, like if anything traumatic happens to me, whether someone else may consider it minute, I will go and speak to one of my professors and just, talk to them about it because I want to express, I want to get that out. That is something I would have not done my freshman year, but I know now that I need it. Otherwise, I won't heal properly, at least for me. I know that to be true. And so I would personally encourage that if you notice these chronic symptoms, if you feel these things to be true, even if you go and you Google the symptoms and it says that you have chronic anxiety or chronic depression, speak to a professional, because you may not know the next step to take for yourself. And often naming it helps, but it also becomes overwhelming, because now it wasn't simply I had a bad week or a bad year. It's I have depression.
Right.
What do I do about that? And you may blame yourself, like, I just wasn't strong enough mentally. And that was something I did. I was like, oh, I'm weak. That's why I have these issues. I'm not trying hard enough to be happy.
And society tells you that sometimes too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's such a poor stigma around mental health. Even now, if you turn on the television, whenever they speak about mental health, it's always after someone has done something horrific.
Right. Yeah.
It's always after like a mass shooting. We need to talk about mental health. But there are people
every day.
Yeah. Your peers, even your professors, like, they're struggling with these things. It's not the extremists. It's everyday people.
Right.
And so it's really, really important to speak to someone you trust. I know, for me personally, when I was experiencing those things, I wasn't sure if I wanted to speak to the people on campus, because my parents work on campus too.
Right.
And so I was very apprehensive about that, which is why I was like, I'll fix it myself. And so it's really important not to limit yourself to just who may be the closest. Look for mental health professionals in your area. If you trust another adult, if you trust your pastor, speak to them. But it's very, very important that you speak to someone.
Okay. So you kind of touched on something that was really good. And I think I agree with that too. Always seeking outside help is just way more beneficial, because you never really know exactly how to address a problem for yourself, because it's you.
Yeah.
So, but you also touched on the part that sometimes you blame yourself and you say, oh, I'm weak. I wasn't able to sustain other things that other people were able to handle, and they're not suffering from these type of things, even though you don't really know what they're going through. But I've always wondered this myself, is a mental health issue something that you just are born with, or something that was there with you all along and it's just now manifesting itself, or is it something induced by your environment? Did something cause this thing? Was it stress at work? Was it stress at school? Was it some type of childhood experience that gave me this, or things like that? Because I think once you address a problem, you kind of think of, well, how did this happen?
Yes.
So I don't really know. So yeah.
No, that is something that's really at the forefront of psychology, even today. Understanding that, okay, I have this, but where did it come from? Where did it stem from? And could I have stopped it? Is it something that I did? Is it something I was just born with? And there are many studies done. There's actually a statement made by one of the doctors of the National Institute of Mental Health. And I felt like it was a really prevalent quote for this actual question. He said, "It is not a question of genes versus environment. It is a question of how genes interact with whatever the environment factors might be." And that it is probably true of all the disorders that we call mental illness. And so there is a genetic link to many mental illnesses. For example, schizophrenia. That is one that they've said this particularly runs in the family. You can also say that for depression. And if you ever speak to like a mental professional, they may ask you, does anyone else in your family have these type of mental illnesses? Because it's really important to know not only like what they may have and how that could affect you, but also the experiences that you both have gone through. Because you can have twins, same upbringing and everything, but you test them, one could have depression, the other one may not. And that could either very well be genetic makeup, but they are identical, or that could also just be how they handled the environment. And so it is important to note that trauma, like PTSD, that is not genetic. That is environmental. But you also have schizophrenia and depression, and you have some are actually at higher risk for, having anxiety, like chronic anxiety. Those things can be passed through by mother to child. And so there are studies being done now to address it. there are some who even want to focus mainly on the African American community and this, I don't know if you ever heard of it, like post-slave syndrome, where they talk about how the injustice that we've had to deal with as African Americans affect the later generations.
What?
And there are studies that actually prove that because of the microaggressions that African Americans have to deal with, and even African American women who are carrying children have to deal with, those different stresses and hormones are passed through to the child. So therefore the child is at higher risk for like heart disease. They're at higher risk for these different stressors. And so because your body is responding to life a particular way, that also affects your mental health. And so this is a very, very up and coming topic and argument, because many are still on both ends, but there's a lot that shows that our genetic makeup is often influenced by our environment,
All right, so
even before you're born.
It's really a mixture of both.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I get to, we're starting to draw to a close, and the last one I want to ask last because I think it's most relevant to most people. But I just want to ask, I like on the podcast, I like to have practical applications. So how can I take this, what I have listened to on this episode today, and apply it to my life right now? So what are some things that you can do, even if, let's say you're not necessarily diagnosed with some type of chronic mental illness, but things that you've just been struggling with internally that you want to deal with, and you don't want to like keep holding them in or keep putting them off and trying to deal with them later? What are some things that an everyday person could do on a daily, weekly, or monthly, whatever basis to help them kind of work their way out of these type of mental situations?
I think the first thing that everyone should do is make themselves a priority. Focus on yourself. Take time to look at yourself, evaluate yourself, with not necessarily being critical, like, oh man, I need to do better, my hair looks like mess, but really just looking at yourself, looking at your accomplishments, acknowledging the good that you've done so far, and really being intentional about what you do with yourself moving forward. I've recently started doing this, really taking time to acknowledge myself as an individual who contributes to society, and how I am going to continue to contribute to society as I get older. I'm not just a bystander in some video game. I am here for a reason, and I have a purpose. And so because I have a purpose, I need to approach each day with a drive and a motivation. Ensuring that you get sleep. It may sound very cliche, but as I get older, I realize how tired I am when I wake up. But I also realize like I'm not making sleep an event. I kind of just lay in bed and I'm still on my phone. I don't treat sleep like a sacred thing.
Cherish sleep.
Yes, the sleep, eating, exercise, these are the times where you're actually cherishing yourself. But I don't think we do that.
Yeah, that was my stomach. I'm hungry, man.
I don't think we take enough time to do that. We hop in bed and we're like, whatever, I'm gonna get up in the morning. But that's really time to like love yourself, take care of yourself, you know. Turn off your lights, put your electronics away, wash your face, brush your teeth, lay down, really be intentional about what you do with yourself. Talking to others, that's another important thing. I know I mentioned that earlier, talking to a professional, but even just finding a healthy outlet, whether that be music, whether that be singing or listening to music, whether that be writing, doing poetry, cooking, walking, running, whatever your niche is, do what you know that you enjoy. Because it goes and reestablishes you doing things for yourself. Another thing is to say no. I am a yes woman. I will do things I know I don't want to do because I know that's the response you want from me.
Right, yeah.
And so when I do that, I take away my own freedom from myself in other situations. Like right now, I'm looking forward to the summer so I can sleep. But why haven't I been taking care of myself now?
Right. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the summer so I can do things that I want to do. But why don't I take every day to invest in myself?
That's so true.
And so I think it's really important to say no. And that is something that I'm actively trying to do moving forward, saying...
And you have to practice it too.
Yeah. Say no. This may not be the most popular response, but I would also say avoid fillers that you use to replace whatever emptiness you have.
Mm-hmm.
One thing in biopsych that we spoke on was substances and how that affects your brain, and how there are excitatory drugs and inhibitory drugs, and how those things mimic the neurotransmitters in your brain. And so when you use substances, like say you're just feeling sad, so you use whatever drug. When you use these substances, it's mimicking what you naturally produce, but when you abuse these substances, your brain stops producing these natural things. And so when you get off of whatever drug, or when you stop doing this particular behavior, your brain is now empty because it thought that this whole time you were filling it with other things. It thought that, okay, you don't need as much anymore. So it wasn't producing. And so when you get out of that, you're usually like in a slump, and you're usually worse off than you began. And so I would really encourage, not even just from a spiritual standpoint of, we should treat our bodies like a temple, just from a mental standpoint, take care of yourself and try to stay away from those things, because your brain is balancing everything that you put it through. I feel like
that could be really anything. I don't even want to limit it to like let's say drugs or
food. It does the same thing with food,
sex, social media.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I feel like that's one that's just like, it's so normalized in society, but people will really seek emotional comfort and fillers.
The likes that you get, that actually does something for your brain. It gives you like a shot of dopamine. You feel good the more likes you get.
Right, yeah.
And so when you don't get enough likes, you don't realize this is happening, but you're sad. There's nothing wrong with your photo, but because you didn't get 200 that time, then you feel worse.
Yeah, I just saw a video the other day. It was saying that that basically what the rush of dopamine that you get from saying a comment or a like on something on social media is only about, I forgot what the percentage was. It was really small. It was like, in comparing it to like you hitting cocaine or a highly, highly addictive drug that is illegal.
Yeah. It's the same.
I'm like, that is actually ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like,
there's an addiction to these social
crazy
media. You wonder why these people who have these platforms are billionaires. People can't stay off of it. They need it every day. They need Snapchat. They want to see how many people saw their story. Right. They have to. How many likes did I get on Instagram?
I think I'm going to do another episode actually speaking on social media and its effects, and I don't know how you just deal with it in everyday life, because I'm on social media every day. Like I post like 2-3 times a day, but that's kind of for a different reason. But but before our time runs out and before my battery dies, I just want to do one more thing, addressing stress, because as I know that's something that we all deal with every day. There's good stress, there's bad stress, but there's always stress. Every day you wake up and you realize you can't find your other sock. There's some level of stress. We don't think of that as stress, but that's stress. You're trying to find your sock, which always seems to disappear. It's always one of them. I don't know why. But going off topic, so like whether it's your stress at work with a boss, a supervisor, stress with your children, it's finals week coming up here, so stress with that. I see lots of people like on Twitter, I'm stressed, including myself. Like I'm tired and stressed. I have to study for a final for tomorrow. But what are some things that you can do to alleviate that stress, at least temporarily, so that you can refocus yourself, regroup, and go towards something at a very level-headed or healthy mindset?
I think the first thing would be to create realistic expectations for yourself. Usually when you're experiencing stress, you may behave irrationally. And I mean, in the case of like, yeah, I can't find my sock this morning. And now I'm freaking out. I'm pulling everything out the drawers just to find one sock. When I could have just taken a moment to step back and think, when I took my socks off, where did I put them? Oh, they're right there.
Right.
You know, I think we move too fast when we're stressed. We try to do everything, and therefore we accomplish nothing. I'm really great at accomplishing nothing by trying to do everything. I'll work on a paper, try to study music, and, you know, listen to a podcast all at the same time. I'm getting nothing done. And here I am thinking that if I can do everything at once, I'm going to be very proactive. And so being realistic with our expectations, if you know you have a paper due and it's 12 pages and you have 5 days left, you can either do what we usually do, I'll wait until the night before to complete the assignment, or you can section out pages for every day that you have left. And then on that, the night before, you can do some editing. Right. This is not the popular option. And it puts too much responsibility on you over a longer period of time. But this is probably one of the best things you can do, setting realistic expectations, but also holding yourself accountable. You may have to delete social media for like 5 days just so that you can accomplish your goals. But you have to think about the bigger picture.
Can we do that?
It's difficult, but I've actually not had an Instagram for years at this point now, because I realized every morning I woke up just to do nothing but scroll.
Just look, first thing you do in the morning.
Yeah.
I had to do that with Snapchat the past summer.
Yeah. And so it's possible. It's not fun. Because, you know, that first day of withdrawal, it hurts. You open up your phone to
unlock
do nothing,
it.
and then you're like, oh, this is
I'm like,
a
wow, I'm
clock.
actually experiencing withdrawal symptoms. That's crazy.
So taking time to set realistic expectations and goals, holding yourself accountable, being aware. When you are stressed out, you can become very overwhelmed about everything, even if it comes to you're writing a paper and now you're stressed because you have writer's block. Take a moment. Even if you have to step out of it, listen to some music that you like, watch a video that you like, you know, still have a deadline with yourself, but take care of yourself, because
take a break.
Because you're stressed already. You forcing yourself to do something right now you mentally cannot do is only going to make things worse. And what actually happens in your brain is you have cortisol, and when you're stressed, it goes through. So think of it like traffic. Nothing else can get through if it's backed up with this stress hormone. So you may need to take a moment, let your body process that I am stressed out. We're going to address it, and we can get back to completing the assignment. I mean, often you do get an adrenaline rush from being stressed. So, you know, you have distress and eustress, but some stress is good for you. It allows you to focus and get things done. But as college students, we often experience the latter. We often experience more distress because there's just so much going on. It's not just this class. It's also I have to turn in this application for the internship, and did I get that scholarship? And I have to call my mother in the morning, and it's so much. And so I think it's really important to take care of ourselves. Treat yourself, pamper yourself, take time to really focus on yourself. I often keep like assignments that I did well on, like on my wall. That might be really, really lame, but I'll keep like plane tickets of where aliens have traveled. I'll keep photos of like family. That's a really good idea. I keep it on my walls.
Positive
so that
affirmation kind of, or reaffirmation.
Because sometimes when I'm working on assignments, I just feel like, what am I doing? Like I hit a wall and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And then I look up at this wall like, okay, I have purpose. Okay, I know what I'm doing. And so it's good to try to refocus. Take care of yourself, but refocus, and especially set realistic expectations when you're faced with stress. You were asking me, like, what can we do to create a healthy environment, a mentally healthy environment for others? And I thought that being open and understanding to the reality that mental health is not universal in nature for everyone is very key in that. Your bout with depression is not going to be the same as mine, and how you handle anxiety is not going to be the same as how I handle it. But it's important to note that a person is not weak if they need prescribed medications to handle depression or anxiety or schizophrenia. I think it's really important for us not to turn our heads at those who are really fighting and struggling, because it takes a strong person to get up when everything inside of them is telling them to stay down. It takes a strong person to interact with others when they're battling so much internally. And I really appreciate what you're doing, this platform that you have. And I really hope that, like you were saying, if it's just one person who comes to a realization, or they're more open-minded to others, then you would have done a phenomenal thing.
Yeah. Cool. Jojo, that was great. I feel like sometimes I have podcast episodes in my head. I'm like, yeah, no one's really going to relate to that. I shouldn't really do that episode or whatever. But honestly, something just kept pushing at me. It was like, no, you need to do this episode. So I appreciate you coming in, sharing your knowledge. You brought up lots of things that I did not know and things that I could definitely use later when speaking to my peers or speaking to other people, educating them about mental health. And just sharing it with the masses. So I appreciate you being on this episode of the Muse Report.
Oh, I appreciate you allowing me to share my knowledge.
That's it for this episode of the Muse Report. I will see you guys next week with another episode with a very special guest that I'm excited to share with you guys. Or is it the week after? I'm not sure. But yeah, stay tuned. Subscribe, share with your mom, your uncle, your cousin, Bobby, all of them. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Peace.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Jocelyn dropped so much knowledge that I know is valuable to someone out there. And I just want you guys to really take this episode seriously, and the fact that mental health is a real thing, just how physical health and exercise is a real thing, how emotional health is a real thing, how spiritual health is a real thing. Mental health is a very real thing that you should practice taking care of. And I hope that you were able to hear some of the tips that she brought out from her personal experience and how you could deal with them in your personal lives. So if you enjoyed this episode, and if you feel like someone else can grow from this episode as well, I challenge you to share it with somebody. You could go on our Facebook page, the Muse Report podcast on Facebook, follow and like it, and share the link with someone, or you can share the link on iTunes or Google Play Store, however you want to do it. But don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Share it with somebody so that they can grow from it as well. And as I say always with Muse, we want to learn something new, grow from that experience, and then inspire others with our personal growth and experiences. So that's it for this episode. Make sure you give a good rating and subscribe to the podcast. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.
Hey guys, Clee here. Thanks so much for listening to the Build Your Vision podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would think you did if you stayed all the way to the end. The best thing that you could do to help support this show is by sharing it with somebody. By you just taking a few seconds to recommend this show to somebody, you are making a huge impact, not only on the success of this show, but possibly on that person's life.